There is a specific kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. It is a heaviness that sits behind your eyes, a persistent, low-level hum of anxiety that only spikes when you are forced to interact with certain people. You have likely spent years telling yourself that you are simply introverted, or perhaps too sensitive, or maybe even socially inept. You walk into a room, and before a single word is spoken, you feel a shift in the atmosphere. A density, a coldness, or a chaotic energy that no one else seems to notice. While others laugh and engage in superficial chatter, you feel a visceral impulse to flee, to retreat into silence, to sever the connection. You might have even noticed that lately, your tolerance for small talk has evaporated completely, replaced by a sudden, sharp irritability that frightens you. You look at your friends, your family, or your colleagues, and you feel an inexplicable distance, as if you are watching them through a pane of glass, observing a performance that you can no longer participate in. Whatever you think this is, depression, burnout, or a deteriorating personality, you are wrong. These are not symptoms of a breakdown. They are the initial calibration signals of a dormant psychological mechanism coming online. Jung identified this phenomenon nearly a century ago, though he didn't have the modern terminology to describe the biological havoc it wreaks on your nervous system. You are not broken. You are experiencing what I call the authentic recoil. It is a violent, involuntary rejection of the artificiality that permeates the modern world. And it is happening because you are part of a specific evolutionary cohort that Carl Jung prophesied would rise when the collective psyche of humanity reached a breaking point. To understand why you feel like a stranger in your own life, we must first dismantle the archaic idea that feeling is a weakness. In the modern world, we prioritize logic, speed, and efficiency, traits often associated with the thinking function in Jungian psychology. We view emotions as messy biological byproducts, obstacles to productivity. But Jung argued that feeling is not merely emotion. He defined it as a rational function of valuation. It is the psychological organ that determines the worth, the danger, and the intent of an object or a person. When you feel that sudden wave of nausea around a charismatic stranger, or that inexplicable anger when a boss praises you with a hollow smile, you are not being emotional, you are engaging in high-speed data processing. Modern neuroscience validates what Jung intuited in his Red Book. Your brain contains a network of mirror neurons, specialized cells in the premotor cortex and inferior parietal lobule that fire both when you act and when you observe someone else acting. They allow you to internally simulate the internal state of another person. For most people, this system is dampened by social conditioning. They ignore the data to maintain the peace, but for you, the damping mechanism has failed. You are suffering from unfiltered limbic resonance. You are picking up on the micro-expressions, the pheromonal shifts, and the subtle cadence inconsistencies that signal deception. When you encounter a narcissist, someone who has severed their connection to their own true self to maintain a false persona, your mirror neurons attempt to simulate their internal state and find a void. They find a disconnect between the smiling mask and the predatory intent beneath. This neural dissonance triggers a cortisol spike in your blood, which you experience as anxiety or sudden fatigue. You aren't crazy, you are detecting a predator. Jung warned that as society drifted further into materialism and the worship of the persona, the mask we wear for the world, the collective unconscious would attempt to correct the balance. He believed that the psyche is a self-regulating system, much like the body temperature or blood pressure. When the world becomes too cold, too calculated, and too dominated by what he called the paucity of soul, the unconscious produces individuals who are hypersensitive to the truth. You are the antibody. However, being the antibody is a painful existence. Jung observed that the feeler in a thinking-dominated type of society is often pathologized. You have likely been told to toughen up or stop overthinking. This gaslighting compels you to suppress your primary function. You try to shut down your intuition. You try to ignore the shadow static, that buzzing sense of wrongness you feel around certain people. But repression only leads to what Jung called the enantiodromia, the turning of a thing into its opposite. Because you have denied your nature as a censor of truth, you have become a magnet for the very thing you despise, the narcissist. It is one of the darkest paradoxes of depth psychology. The narcissist, who lacks an authentic self, is fundamentally empty. They are looking for fuel, for attention, for emotional reaction. You, the feeler, are brimming with what Jung termed libido, not sexual energy, but psychic life force. You feel deeply, you value intensely, and you seek connection. To the narcissist, you shine like a beacon in the dark. But because you have not yet mastered your gift, because you still view your sensitivity as a defect, you lack the defenses to keep them out. You invite them in, thinking their intensity matches yours, only to realize too late that they are not seeking connection, they are seeking consumption. This leads to a state of being that I classify as empathic hemorrhage. You give and they take. You explain and they dismiss. You try to heal them, hoping that if you just pour enough love and understanding into the void, they will finally become real. But Jung knew that you cannot heal someone who refuses to confront their own shadow. By trying to fix the narcissist, you are engaging in a dangerous form of projection. You are projecting your own capacity for empathy onto a creature that is structurally incapable of it. You assume that deep down they are like you. They are not. This realization usually breaks a person. It creates the cynicism and the exhaustion you are feeling right now. It is the dark night of the soul where you realize that your empathy has been weaponized against you. But this breaking point is necessary. It is the precursor to what Jung called individuation. You are currently standing at the threshold of a transformation. The rage you feel is not toxic. It is the energy of your own shadow rising up to protect you. It is your psyche screaming at you to stop casting your pearls before swine. You are moving from a state of naive empathy to what we will designate as sovereign perception. But before you can fully inhabit this power, you must understand the specific mechanics of the trap you are in. You must understand why the narcissist was drawn to you and why paradoxically you were drawn to them. It was not an accident. It was a compulsion of the unconscious, a replay of ancient dramas stored in your amygdala seeking resolution. Jung spoke often of the wounded healer, but in your case, we must look at the blind seer. You see everything about others, yet you remain blind to the value of your own sight. You treat your intuition as a nuisance rather than a navigation system. To change this, we must look at the specific signs that your psyche is trying to give you. These are not vague feelings. They are precise, biological, and psychological markers that indicate you're in the presence of a soul eater. Consider the phenomenon of brain fog when you are around a specific person. You are normally articulate, sharp, and quick-witted, yet when you are in the presence of this individual, your mind goes blank. You struggle to find words. You feel clumsy, stupid, or slow. Jung would analyze this not as a failure of your intellect, but as an invasion of your psychic territory. This is the parasitic dampening field. The narcissist operates by projecting their own internal chaos outward. Because you are a feeler, you are porous. You absorb this chaos. Your brain stops processing your own thoughts because it is completely overwhelmed by the task of processing theirs. You are literally thinking their thoughts and feeling their suppressed shame, which leaves no bandwidth for your own consciousness. This phenomenon was clearly documented in one of Jung's less publicized case studies, a file we will refer to as the case of the architect. The patient was a man of high standing, a creator of skyscrapers, a master of logic and structure. Yet he came to Jung trembling, convinced he was suffering from early onset dementia. He described a strange lethargy that only descended upon him when he returned home to his younger, vibrant wife. He would enter his front door and immediately feel his intellect dissolve. He couldn't finish sentences. He forgot simple appointments. He felt small, grey, and indistinct. Jung did not prescribe medication. He analysed the wife's dreams, or rather the lack of them. He realised that the architect's wife was possessed by a severe negative anima inflation. She was internally vacuous, devoid of her own creative spark, and so she unconsciously fed on his. She didn't beat him, she didn't yell, she simply existed as a psychological black hole. The architect, being a feeler who had repressed his intuition in favour of logic, had no defence. He was pouring his psychic energy into her in a desperate attempt to fill a bottomless cup. Jung told him, "You are not losing your mind. You are suffering from psychic osmosis. You are being drained because you have mistaken a parasite for a partner." This is the danger you face. Your empathy acts as an open channel. When you connect with a narcissist, you are essentially hardwiring your nervous system to theirs. But because their system is regulated by shame and envy, you begin to circulate their toxins through your own emotional bloodstream. To survive this, you must learn to identify the stages of the trap. You must recognize the specific signals your body sends before your mind has time to rationalize them away. We can classify these signals into 3 distinct phases of the predator protocol. The first phase is what I call the somatic veto. Long before you realize someone is toxic, your body knows. The enteric nervous system, often called the second brain in your gut, contains 100 million neurons and produces 95% of your serotonin. It is evolutionarily older and faster than your neocortex. When you are around a narcissist, your body detects the threat to your autonomy. You might experience sudden migraines, a tightening of the throat, the globus sensation, or a deep, inexplicable exhaustion that hits you the moment you agree to see them. This is not stress. This is your biological hard drive attempting to reject a virus. You have likely spent years ignoring this signal, taking painkillers or drinking coffee to push through the fatigue, telling yourself you are just tired. You are not tired. You are under siege. If you ignore the somatic veto, you enter the second phase, the reality distortion field. This corresponds to the Jungian concept of projection, but in reverse. The narcissist projects their shadow, their hidden malice, their envy, their insecurity onto you. Because of your high empathy and active mirror neurons, you accept this projection. You start to believe you are the selfish one. You are the difficult one. You begin to police your own thoughts. Neuroscience shows that long-term exposure to this kind of emotional manipulation shrinks the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for learning and memory, while enlarging the amygdala, the fear center. You literally lose the neurological capacity to trust your own perception of reality. You become an extension of their psyche, a character in their script, reciting lines you didn't write. The third and most dangerous phase is the isolation imperative. Once the narcissist has destabilized your reality, they must ensure you have no other reference points. They don't necessarily forbid you from seeing friends. That would be too clumsy. Instead, they subtly devalue your connections. They make you feel guilty for enjoying time away. They create a us against the world narrative. Jung warned that isolation is the breeding ground for psychosis. By cutting you off from the collective, from the feedback loops of healthy relationships, the narcissist traps you in a closed-loop hallucination. You stop growing, you stop individuating, you become a static object, a battery stored on a shelf, used only when they need a jolt of supply. Recognizing these phases is the first step, but observation alone is not the cure. The cure requires a fundamental restructuring of how you use your gift. You must transition from being a sponge, absorbing everything without a filter, to becoming what I call the Obsidian Mirror, In alchemy, which Jung studied extensively as a metaphor for psychological transmutation, the goal is to separate the subtle from the gross. You must learn to separate your emotions from their projections. This is not about becoming cold. It is not about killing your empathy. That would be a tragedy, for your empathy is the very thing the future of humanity requires. Instead, you must develop selective empathic immunity. This requires a difficult shift in your internal posture. When you feel the wave of the narcissist's chaos hitting you, the guilt, the pressure, the sudden urgency, you must stop engaging. You must disengage your mirror neurons from the simulation loop. Jung called this withdrawing the projection. You stop seeing them as a wounded child who needs your help, and you start seeing them as they truly are, a tragedy that you cannot write a happy ending for. You must engage the observer self. In meditation practice and cognitive behavioral therapy, this is the part of your consciousness that watches your thoughts without attaching to them. When the narcissist attacks or manipulates, instead of reacting with defense, which feeds them, or submission, which feeds them, you simply observe. You visualize a glass wall between you and them. You see their words as colored smoke hitting the glass and sliding off. You do not let it enter your system. You say to yourself, "This is their storm. I am merely the witness." This creates a phenomenon known as the narcissistic starvation event. The narcissist relies on your emotional reaction to regulate their own internal state. When you withhold that reaction, when you offer them nothing but neutral observation, they panic. They may escalate their behavior, trying to provoke you into anger or tears. But if you hold the line, if you remain the obsidian mirror, reflecting their own void back at them without adding your light, they will eventually recoil. They will feel the terror of their own emptiness because you are no longer filling it for them. This process is painful. It goes against every instinct you have as a healer and a feeler. You will feel like you are being cruel. You will feel like you are betraying your nature. But you must understand, you are not betraying your nature. You are protecting it. You are conserving your energy for those who can reciprocate, for the work you were actually put here to do. You are not on this earth to be a psychological dialysis machine for people who refuse to treat their own toxicity. You are here to bring the unconscious into the light, to integrate the shadow, and to push the evolution of consciousness forward. But you cannot do that if you are constantly anemic, drained by the vampire archetype. This leads us to the final, necessary realization. The rise of the feeler, your rise, is not an accident, it is a correction. The world is drowning in narcissism, in superficiality, in a total disconnection from the self. Nature is trying to produce a cure. You are the cure. But a cure that is consumed by the disease helps no one. The integration of your shadow is the key. You must find the part of yourself that is capable of aggression, of boundaries, of saying no with absolute finality. Jung argued that a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a dangerous man, who has his danger under voluntary control. You must find your inner teeth. You must be willing to be the bad guy in the narcissist's story so that you can be the hero in your own. As you begin to practice selective empathic immunity, you will notice a change. The brain fog will lift, the fatigue will evaporate. You will feel a surge of creative energy that you haven't felt since childhood. This is the return of your libido, your life force, flowing back into its proper channel, your own individuation. You will stop attracting narcissists, not because they disappear from the world, but because you no longer emit the frequency of a victim. You will emit the frequency of a sovereign. You will become visible to others of your kind. Other feelers, other intuitives, other architects of the new paradigm who have been waiting for you to wake up. Do not fear the separation that comes next. Do not fear the loss of the false connections. You are shedding a skin that was never yours to begin with. You are stepping out of the hall of mirrors and into the real world. The path is narrow and the work is solitary, but you are not alone in this. The collective unconscious is shifting. The era of the empty persona is ending. The era of the authentic self is beginning, and you are the vanguard. See you in the next dimension.